Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.
Welcome to all.
Una storia
History is
interessante.
made of stories.
In this episode, we'll be talking a recurring issue when a situation needs resolving. How do you know what the real problem is?
There's a problem, so I suggest a solution right away. After all, as the saying goes, every problem has a solution, right?
Unfortunately, if you try to get to the solution too quickly in a rushed attempt to satisfy the request, you may actually create another problem. Because the problem that needs solving isn't always the problem that's been identified. So, getting to the root of the problem, what's the story?
The problem is easy to understand. When someone asks you to fix a situation, they haven't always identified the actual problem to resolve. Multiple biases can explain the difference between the two.
For example, a few years ago a major consulting firm contacting me based on a request from one of their clients. The client, a sales manager at a big company, has been experiencing heavy turnover among his salespeople for some time and wants to revamp his base compensation policy.
Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? The salespeople are leaving the company because they aren't paid enough. They can make more elsewhere, so they're leaving. Changing the compensation policy is a good solution.
A lack of competitive compensation could be the cause of the turnover, but where's the proof? You have to really dive into the situation to find out.
Does the issue affect both beginners and more senior salespeople? Is it tied to base salary or variable compensation? Or both?
And there could be a multitude of other reasons. Maybe they're quitting because there's too much pressure or because their manager is a jerk.
The only way to know for sure is to ask them. The situation deserves at least a minimum amount of research before blindly rolling out higher salaries.
That's why it's important to go beyond the client's request to get to the root of the problem. In other words, you have to call upon your critical thinking and honesty to properly analyze the problem.
Because the request may be irreparably impacted by the client's biases or unspoken interests. His request is a manifestation of his needs, not the reality. And even then, his real need may not be the root of the problem.
Imagine, for example, a patient asking a physical therapist to tend to their knee because it hurts after walking. Their need is to no longer have pain in their knee, but maybe the real root of the problem comes from elsewhere. One leg could be shorter than the other, or the patient could be overweight or have an issue with their hip, etc.
The physical therapist has to get to the root of the problem to provide relief for the patient, even if that means sending them to another specialist.
And that's exactly what you have to do with a request from a client. Look into the issue, calling upon your critical thinking skills to reach the root cause, the one problem that is causing all the symptoms, if you will.
In practice, you just have to ask why. Why are you formulating this request? If you ask it enough, there's the 5 whys technique. You'll eventually get to the root cause.
Yes, but there are obstacles along the way, power games, which may lead certain people to hide things. There are often unspoken goals behind a project.
So you need to be clear with yourself. Are you looking to do as a client asks or fix the root problem in the best interest of the company?
In other words, you have to go beyond the superficial to think critically, because there are almost never easy, ready-made solutions.
And when it comes to the client-supplier relationship, aiming to serve the client company rather than simply comply with their request to put money in the bank can really set you apart.
So the question is, as a service provider or employee, do you allow yourself to question the requests you receive? How far are you willing to take it?
To recap, when a problem needs to be resolved, it's important to look beyond the initial request, using critical thinking and intellectual honesty to find the root cause. Is that right?
Exactly right. Way to make a long story short.
Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.